Rome had no internet, no cameras, no police. Yet it controlled 60 million people across 3 continents for 500 years. The empire stretched from Britain to Iraq, from Germany deep into the Sahara, linked by 80,000 kilometers of stone roads. Most people think Rome held power the usual way: swords, legions, and crushing anyone who dared resist with overwhelming military force. But here is the thing. Rome only had about 30 legions for the whole empire, not enough to guard every corner of 3 continents. So if brute force was not the answer, what was? What invisible mechanism held 60 million people in check for half a millennium? Think about that. An area larger than the modern European Union, with dozens of languages and cultures, held together for 5 centuries. The answer begins with someone you would never expect. Not an emperor, not a general, not a senator. A slave dragged to Rome in chains. In 272 BC, Roman soldiers sacked the Greek city of Tarentum and hauled thousands of prisoners back to Rome as property. Among those captives was a man named Livius Andronicus, a Greek teacher with no idea he was about to reshape Western civilization. This enslaved man became Rome's very first school teacher, the one who planted the seed of an education system that held an empire together. But Livius was just the beginning. What the Romans built from that seed was not a school system, it was a control machine in disguise. From the outside it looked like opportunity, from the inside it felt like freedom. But the true purpose was neither of those things. From the 3rd century BC, Rome built a 3-tier education structure that looked generous on the surface: ludus, grammaticus, and rhetor. Tier 1, the ludus, was for kids aged 7 to 12. Reading, writing, basic math. Most Roman children went through this level. Tier 2, the grammaticus, was for ages 12 to 15, Greek and Latin literature. But it cost money, and that filtered people out. Only wealthy families could afford this tier. Everyone else stopped right there. And that was not an accident, it was the whole point. The 3rd tier, the rhetor, was reserved for the elite. Rhetoric, philosophy, law. The skills that opened every door in Roman politics. Here is the key. This system was never designed to educate. It was built so every social class learned just enough for their assigned role. The poor could read laws and follow orders, but never argue in court. Those skills were kept behind a paywall only the rich could afford. Only the elite learned rhetoric, the one skill needed to participate in Roman politics. No rhetoric meant no voice and no power at all. Think about it. A poor Roman could read a public notice on the wall, but he could never stand in the forum and challenge a senator. He could understand the words on the wall, but never shape the words spoken in the Senate. That gap was engineered from the very start. Roman education was a filter. It did not block people from learning. It blocked them from learning the one thing that could threaten power. Educators call this the hidden curriculum. Philip Jackson coined the term in 1968. Rome perfected it 2 millennia earlier. Quintilian, Rome's most famous teacher, became the first educator in history to receive a salary from the state for his teaching work. When the state pays for education, the state decides what gets taught. And what gets left out matters far more than what gets included. Picture a system people joined by choice, paid for gladly, and never questioned. No soldiers required, no chains, not even a hint of force. Nobody felt controlled. That is what made it brilliant. The best prison is one where every inmate believes they chose to walk right in. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because what Rome did next went far beyond classrooms and lesson plans into raw emotion. But education only shapes what people think. To control what they feel and desire, Rome needed something far more powerful and immediate. The Colosseum held up to 80,000 spectators watching gladiators bleed and die, while wild animals tore each other apart for sport. The Circus Maximus was even bigger, over 150,000 fans packed in for chariot races that make modern sports look small. And alongside the spectacles, Rome ran a free grain program called the Cura Annonae. feeding hundreds of thousands of citizens for free. Feed the people, entertain the people. The result? They stop rioting, stop questioning, and stop caring about who actually runs the empire. The poet Juvenal, writing around 100 AD, gave this strategy its famous name, panem et circenses. Bread and circuses, that is all. 2,000 years later, we have social media, streaming services, and delivery apps. Different packaging, same mechanism, same result. The details change, the screens get brighter, but the function stays the same. Keep people busy enough that they never ask real questions. To be fair, Juvenal was a satirist, not a policy analyst. But the behavioral pattern he identified was genuine, and Rome exploited it fully. But bread and circuses only quieted the capital. What about the provinces, far from Rome, full of people with their own distinct cultures? For that, Rome had something elegant. In every conquered territory, they built the same things: bathhouses, schools, arenas, and roads. They taught the locals Latin, dressed them in togas, introduced Roman law and customs, and called the whole package one word: civilization. Local elites were invited into the system, given Roman titles and power, then asked to govern their own people by Roman rules. Most agreed. The historian Tacitus saw through all of it. In Agricola, he described how the Britons eagerly adopted Roman dress, language, and customs. He saw what no one else was willing to say, that the greatest trick of empire was making the conquered grateful for their own submission. Then he delivered the blow. What the Britons proudly called civilization was nothing more than a component of their enslavement. Period. Think about that. The conquered people were proud of being conquered because conquest had been rebranded as enlightenment and given a toga. They did not resist because there was nothing to resist against. The system felt like a gift, not a cage, and that was the whole trick. Tacitus also noted that Rome used native leaders as tools, giving local chiefs Roman titles so they would enforce Roman laws on their own. The chiefs wore togas and spoke Latin in council meetings, enforcing rules written in a city most of them would never visit in their lives. No legions were needed in the provinces. The conquered governed themselves by Roman rules, believing they were partners in something great. It was the most elegant empire ever built. Convince the colonized they are collaborators, and they will maintain the machine without you. And the beauty of it was that everyone played their part willingly, proudly, never suspecting they were pieces on someone else's board. But to spread this across 3 continents, Rome needed human seeds, carriers who would plant Roman culture in every corner of the empire. Those carriers were not diplomats. They were retired soldiers, veterans who served 25 years defending the frontiers of the empire. Augustus himself recorded that he settled about 300,000 veterans across the provinces after their years of military service. 300,000 ex-soldiers across the empire. They were not just retiring in peace, they carried an invisible mission with them. Each veteran settled in a distant province, married a local woman, and raised children who grew up speaking Latin at home from birth. They opened schools, taught local kids Latin, introduced Roman legal customs, and built little communities that slowly came to mirror Rome. Imagine a soldier who spent decades far from home. Now he has land, a wife, children. He tells his kids about Rome like it was a holy city. His children would marry locals, their children would do the same, and the memory of any other way of living would simply fade into nothing. And slowly, without violence, without a single order from the capital, that soldier's household becomes the seed of a new Roman community. Without anyone planning it from above, an entire village starts speaking Latin, following Roman customs, and thinking of itself as Roman. Hundreds of veteran colonies were planted from Britain to North Africa, Spain to Syria, each one a self-sustaining outpost of Roman culture. Every colony was a node in a vast web of cultural control, connected by roads, language, and law. The empire felt like one unified nation. And then Rome made its final move, the one that sealed the entire system shut and made it nearly impossible for anyone to walk away from it. In 212 AD, Emperor Caracalla issued the Constitutio Antoniniana, granting citizenship to every free person living within the empire. Sounds like liberation. Millions across 3 continents suddenly became Roman citizens with rights and protections they never had before, but citizenship came with strings attached. New citizens paid Roman taxes, followed Roman law, and were absorbed into the imperial machine. This was the pivot from ruling by force to ruling by identity. You do not need to coerce people who are proud to call themselves Roman. Why would you rebel against a system that just handed you rights, status, and a name? The chains feel like gifts. That was the whole point. You cannot rebel against a gift. You cannot fight a system that says you belong now. And that is exactly what made the whole thing perfect. Now step back and see the full picture. Layer 1. Education that sorted people into roles and taught each class what it needed to know. Layer 2. Bread and circuses that kept the masses fed, entertained, and politically asleep so they never looked up long enough to notice. Layer 3. Cultural assimilation that made conquered peoples abandon their identities and proudly adopt Roman customs as their very own. Layer 4. Citizenship that turned subjects into stakeholders, giving everyone a reason to defend the very system controlling their lives. 4 layers of control. Not one required violence. Every single layer was something people wanted, asked for, and celebrated with open arms. And that is the genius of it. Not a single drop of blood was needed because every link in the chain was something the people asked for. Who does not want education, entertainment, belonging, legal rights? Rome figured out that the best control feels exactly like a gift. The most secure prison is one where inmates build the walls, guard the doors, and never realize they are trapped. Rome understood this. This is the hidden curriculum of Rome. Not one single policy. 4 interlocking systems of control, each disguised as a gift to the people. Then the Western Empire fell in 476 AD. You might think the system collapsed with it. You would be completely wrong about that. Latin never died. It split into 5 languages spoken by over 1 billion people today: French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian. Roman law never vanished. It became the foundation of Western legal systems. UNESCO calls the Constitutio a forerunner of the Magna Carta. The 3-tier education model Rome built, still here. How many modern systems sort children into tracks that decide their economic future? Basic school for everyone, specialized training for the middle class, elite institutions grooming future leaders. Does that ring a bell? And bread and circuses? Open your phone. Feeds built to keep you scrolling, platforms to keep you watching, all designed to keep you quiet. Algorithms are the new arenas. Influencers are the new gladiators. Dopamine is the new free grain. The system was updated, not replaced. A Roman arena held 80,000 people. A social media platform holds 2 billion. The scale changed, but the principle never did. Rome fell 1500 years ago, but its hidden curriculum, control through education, entertainment, language, and identity, still runs. The tools changed. Screens replaced arenas, diplomas replaced togas, social feeds replaced grain lines. But the logic remains the same. Give people enough education to be useful, but not dangerous. Enough entertainment to stay happy, but never truly awake. That is the formula. Wrap it in an identity they love, a nationality, a diploma, a following, and they will guard their own cage more fiercely than any army. Every nation uses some version of this playbook, not because they studied Rome, but because Rome found a permanent truth about human nature. People do not fight systems that make them feel included and valued, even when those systems are built to limit their power and vision. We sit in classrooms that sort us, scroll feeds that sedate us, carry identities that bind us, and call the whole arrangement normal. Every part of it feels chosen and earned. That is what the Britons thought when they first wore the toga 2,000 years before us. The question is not whether these systems surround you. They do. In your schools, your feeds, your laws, and the identity you never doubt. The real question, the one Tacitus asked 2,000 years ago, and nobody has answered since, is simple. Can you see it for what it is? Rome crumbled 1500 years ago. But the hidden curriculum, the most powerful control system ever built, is still running around us. And maybe the scariest part is not that it survived, it is that we, like the Britons Tacitus described, still proudly call it civilization.